Sure. All right, hello everybody, and welcome. David Kinder here, and this is the professional life insurance agent discussion group. And every once in a while, we do good webinars of things that I think, are very helpful for the group, for the industry, especially new current events, we could say. And I have with us prolific author, speaker, and trainer, known at least all over the country. I don't know about the world, but definitely all over the country. We have David McKnight, and he has written a new book. And we're going to talk about that book. I've just read it, and we'll start off with a video. Um, let's go.
Right.
David McKnight graduated from Brigham Young University with honors in 1997. He has been featured in Forbes, USA Today, The New York Times, Fox Business, Bloomberg Radio, MarketWatch, CBS Radio, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, NASDAQ.com, Reuters, Investors Business Daily, Kiplinger's, and numerous other national publications. David's best-selling book, The Power of Zero, has sold over 400,000 copies, and the updated and revised version was published by Penguin Random House in 2018. When it launched in September of 2018, it finished the week as the #2 most sold business book in the world. For 2 consecutive years, Forbes magazine has ranked The Power of Zero as a top 10 financial resource in the country. This book was recently made into a full-length documentary film called The Power of Zero. The Tax Train is Coming. When his most recent book, The Guru Gap, launched in December of 2020 at number 8 on the USA Today bestseller list and was the top-selling business book in the world. He and his wife Felice have 7 children. Please give a warm welcome to David McKnight.
It's always a wonderful way to introduce with a nice high power introduction video that way. So excellent. All right. So where do we
Good.
want to start?
Let's,
Gave me a
start with
couple of
those
questions
interview
here.
questions. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I of course I read the book, so I get to come into this interview knowing what you've already written, which I
Well,
don't know how
David,
many
not
other
very many
people have already
people have
read.
read the book. You had the initiative to ask for a copy of the book, and not everybody does. So you showed a lot of initiative there, and I was willing to reward your initiative. So you're not very many people have read it so far. I'd say less than 10.
Very cool. By the way, for everybody watching and listening, this is a very easy read book, by the way. So I'm going to give you that. But you dedicate the book, it's definitely for millennials, Gen Z, and let's just say the TikTok generation.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching everything on social media. It starts off a lot with that. Why did we make the focus of the book target that generation specifically? And what do you think this, especially this generation, the challenges they face that previous generations haven't?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. It's the TikTok generation. It's the instant gratification, generation. It's the shortcut to wealth and riches and the top of the mountain sort of generation. So this is really a generation that has a very, very short attention span. And I think they're all sort of getting to the point where we have shorter and shorter attention spans as we flip through TikTok and Instagram. And, if something doesn't grab our attention in 3 seconds, we don't want to pay attention to it. And so this is sort of at stark contrast with what history shows us are proven time-tested wealth building principles. I mean, if we look at our parents and our grandparents, our forebears, the baby boomers, the Gen X generation, these are folks that have in some cases built millions and millions of dollars in terms of nest egg, and they did it through slow, boring, but time-tested principles that made them wealthy over time. And these, according to all my studies, Gen Z and millennials are really behind the curve in terms of wealth building. Their debt to income ratios are much higher than their forebears. Their investment knowledge is much lower. The amount of money they've accumulated to this phase in their life relative to their forebears at the same time in their lives is much lower. So all of my research suggested that they really are behind the wealth curve, and I think that this book was my best attempt to really sort of inject what I think are proven time-tested principles that made our forebears wealthy into the modern day conversation, and to do so in a sort of a cool, compelling way, with a plot that absorbs you and sucks you in and sort of carries you through all the way to the end, and sort of injects these proven time-tested principles along the way. So you read the story, and the principles are couched within the story, and you're absorbing them and you don't even realize it, right? So that was really the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was reading it, I recognized the pattern. And so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This reads more like a story-driven guide than a traditional money book. In fact, it's not really taught or taught in the first person. Victor asked a great question. What's the name of the book? Perfect question. The Secret Order of Millionaires. Now, for those of us in financial services, every principle in there we're familiar with, just about anyway, especially the first four. You have a license, you're familiar with this stuff. So this is not going to be that revolutionary for us. It's not like there's some huge hidden secret. In fact, by framing it this way, you make it feel like a secret to realize that the time-tested principles is the way to go, and having patience in our wealth building. But if someone hasn't read it yet, now I know how I would describe it, but how would you describe this style and what kind of reading experience you trying to create?
Well, David, I'm interested to see how you would describe it. I'm going to tell you how other people have described it to me so far. They have described it as a financial thriller. They've described it as one part Dan Brown sort of Da Vinci Code, one part sort of M. Night Shyamalan sort of twist ending, where I tell people you're going to want to have some cushions around your chair by the time you get to the ending, because the twist ending is going to knock you clean out of your seat. So it's really sort of a one part Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code, one part M. Night Shyamalan because of the twist ending, and then one part Dave McKnight. So if you were to mash up all those together, that's what this book represents. So I'm curious how you would describe it.
Okay, I don't read any of those other books other than yours. So I can't describe anything like that. So my way of reading it was a mix of Richest Man in Babylon meets the Millionaire Next Door meets David McKnight, updated for today.
Got it.
That's the
Like
way I
that.
read it.
Got it.
So
Love that.
yeah. So it's an updated Richest Man in Babylon parable, easy for someone to read. It's not lecture heavy, although kind of, sort of, maybe. And it depends on how you want to read it. Now, obviously, you've written a lot. And by the way, you've got your other one. This proves that I read all the way to the end. DavidMcKnightBooks.com. No one has ever seen that site, I think it's a new site for you. You've got at least all of your other books right now. And everything you've written about has been tax focused, especially towards retirement, and how to properly
My
position.
camera's doing some crazy things. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully that fixes it. Kept jiggling, and I was getting the emergency warning there. So okay, sorry, keep
Oh,
going.
you must have a power thing. Okay. Yeah. Are you still in Puerto Rico right now? Is that what's going on?
Sure am. Yeah.
Okay, that might do it. Okay, so you obviously written extensively on retirement planning, tax-free strategies, but this book, of course, takes a very different approach. And I've got my thoughts on this, but what prompted you to write a fictional story about these principles about wealth building rather than a traditional business type book?
I mean, it goes back to this TikTok generation. I don't think that the people in the TikTok generation are necessarily interested in picking up a boring business book and sort of plotting their way through it and trying to absorb these principles along the way. I think we're much more likely to sort of make inroads in these generations by giving them a compelling story that grabs their attention and then doesn't let go until the very end. And along the way, they've sort of unwittingly absorbed these principles along the way that sort of refashion how they think about things. So I'm not sure why my camera is that. Are you seeing that on your end, David, where the camera gets the different colors?
Yeah, which mine never
Sure.
does that, but I'm not that fancy. You must have a really good camera. Uh,
I'm not sure what it's doing. Anyway, so that's really the goal in and doing it in a story format is I want to grab their attention, and I want to grab them by the lapels and then not let go until that until that twist ending at the very end, and then boom, all of a sudden along the way, they absorb these principles that is going to sort of refashion their investment worldview.
Yeah, especially, with this TikTok generation, and there's so many issues out there. Although there's a lot of other people creating very good content. By the way, congratulations on hitting 100,000 YouTube subscribers. If everybody's watching this isn't watching you on YouTube, they should at least be hitting subscribe. It wasn't too long ago, you just hit 10,000. So you hit a great momentum curve, which is
The
amazing.
knee of the curve there, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, and so how do you think this book is best positioned? I'm trying to think of how advisors can use it. I'm even thinking about how parents can use it. And I say that because my youngest just turned 18. My other son is 20. My daughter is 22. They need this book. Um, that's for sure. They need this book. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see parents who are well on their wealth building journey to try to say, here's a book that has helped me, that is a simpler version of what I'm doing. You might find it useful. I'm also thinking advisors can easily use this with their current, especially their pre-retiree and retiree clients, to how do we introduce themselves to the next generation? Because without giving away the plot point, you do talk about seven rules of the
Seven
order of
principles, right?
millionaires. And
Right.
the seventh principle is work with a qualified financial advisor. And so I could see this being a way to help bring in the next generation of clients to at least be introduced with, start something with them. And, for most of us being in the life insurance business, just get them a term policy so they have something. You can always convert the thing later. Um, I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts of how advisors can
And I'll,
position this.
and
Is
I'll,
that your thoughts?
I'll, yeah, I'll dig into each of those principles here today with my PowerPoint. But really, I think there's two
Okay.
approaches. I think you've got the parents that say, "Hey, look, this is a great graduation gift for my kid. They're about to set out into the world, and why not give them a good, strong foundation upon which to build financially at the beginning of their lives, as opposed to having them try to figure their stuff out by rote, blind leading the blind sort of stuff." And I think that you also hit the nail on the head, Dave. This is a great way to get to sort of set the table for a tax-free retirement planning conversation with our clients and prospects. And so I've always said, with any of my books, you can take them, you can send them to a client or prospect, little handwritten note, said, "Look, the other day I was reading this book. As I was reading this book, I couldn't stop thinking about your situation. Do me a favor, read the book. I'll call back in a week. Let me know what you think." And it's just, if you keep following up with them until they read the book, eventually they're going to read it. And you dramatically increase the likelihood that they're going to want to do business with you if you follow that course. And so I think that whether it's non-financial advisors who want to sort of give people sort of bend the wealth curve in the favor of these younger generations, or a financial advisor who wants to set the table for a conversation with their clients and prospects, I think this is going to cover a lot of ground. A lot of sort of audiences are going to be affected by this.
Yeah, and work with that multiple generations and such, which in a way is part of the very last part, but that's not the part of the plot. But part of it is passing these principles on so that people can have that for, we could call intergenerational wealth planning. That's part of it. But part of it that has to start with the education piece there. So to me, yes, I saw Millionaire Next Door principles with a storytelling of Richest Man in Babylon, with, in my view, looking at it from a business perspective, with Stephen R. Covey, Begin with the End in Mind. We've kind of orchestrated, here's what an ideal financial plan can look like, and your behavior along the way with each of those principles. That's the way I saw this. And this way, and look at it as a business, in, let's be honest, we're all in sales. We want to get new clients. We've pre-sold them on the plan. The question then becomes is, what are the particulars going to look like for that person? That's the way it looks like to me. You're pre-selling, planning, and working with the financial advisor.
Let me jump into my PowerPoint here, if that's okay.
Please.
Let's see here. Sometimes they make you pull it up first, and then All right, so Dave, I'm gonna talk real fast. We've got about 45 minutes, but I'm gonna try to hit on all seven of these principles. So I'm gonna feel like a runaway train here, but I'm just gonna jump right into it and start with principle number one of the Secret Order of Millionaires. And principle number one is that the stock market is the single greatest engine of wealth creation the world has ever seen. And I love looking at this chart. I mean, I heard what was his name? Nick Murray say that the stock market is a permanent upward trend that's punctuated every 3 to 5 years by a temporary downturn. So, what does the stock market do? It allows you to really tap into the most innovative, dynamic companies in the world. And you got CEOs of these companies who are waking up every day and they're saying, how can I enrich my shareholders? How can I pass all of this wealth on to my shareholders? How can I grow this company in such a way that my shareholders most benefit? And the result of that enterprise over the last 80 years has been 10% average rates of return over that time frame. Now, one of the things that I love about the stock market is something that I call the hassle factor. This little chart here on the right is the return on hassle spectrum. And
Hmm.
we're all to some extent, Dave, we're in business for ourselves, and we whether we have employees or we're trying to track expenses and revenue, and we got to hire and we got to fire people. We're all in our own business. We all understand the type of hassle that goes along with that. And so starting your business has the most return, but it is by far the most angst inducing sort of proposition that you could take on in life. Real estate is slightly below that. But if you look right in the center of the chart, stock market investing has a relatively high rate of return and a relatively low hassle factor. So if you're looking to become a millionaire and not have all the hassle that goes along with starting your own business in real estate, stock market really is the way to go. Now, one of the themes of the book is, hey, look, stock market investing is slow, it's stodgy, it's antiquated. It's what our grandparents did. Why would we want to do it in the age of TikTok? Why would we want to do stock market investing when our parents and grandparents were doing it? Isn't there something much more innovative and modern that's going to make us wealthy quicker? And the answer is no. You might get greater returns in the short term from crypto and altcoins and all these sort of newfangled investment propositions, but none of them have the long-term track record, the long-term time-tested success that stock market investing has. Now, you could say, hey, Dave, what's the proof here? Well, the proof is that 401k millionaires have grown by leaps and bounds over the last 7 years. They've actually quintupled 500% increase in 401k millionaires. And these are just the millionaires at Fidelity, okay? And they're nearly all of them are invested in broad-based stock portfolios. Now, I don't love Dave Ramsey. As you guys know,
No.
I wrote a book explaining why I don't love Dave Ramsey, but Dave Ramsey did do something that I really like. He sponsored this national study on millionaires. He surveyed 10,000 millionaires in the United States, and this is what he sort of discovered. It shocked him. He said they didn't have advanced degrees. Most of them were invested in the stock market in the form of their company 401k, and very few of them had inheritance that was the primary reason for which they had become a millionaire. So if I were to summarize principle number one, and I know I'm going fast, the stock market is going to create more millionaires than just about any other approach. It's averaged 10% over 80 years. It's proven and time tested. Yes, our grandparents did it. Yes, our parents did it, but it's still the principles that made them wealthy can still make the rising generations wealthy. It allows us to tap into the most innovative companies in the world and to do so in a low hassle, relatively angst-free sort of way. So that's principle one. Principle two still has to do with the stock market, and it has to do with time in the market, not timing the market. Now, we know that wealth is built not through picking individual stocks necessarily, but through long-term exposure to the entire stock market. Market timing is unpredictable and unreliable. Remember, the name of the game is to buy low and sell high. When you time the market, you tend to sort of buy high and sell low. Success comes from letting time, not guesswork, do the heavy lifting over time. So why does market timing fail generally? It's because when you're market timing, like I said, you're trying to predict when the market is going to go up, and then you try to get out when the market's going down. So in essence, in that entire proposition, you have to be right twice. You have to be right on when you get in, and you have to be right on when you get out, okay? And if you mistime that entire maneuver, it is going to absolutely devastate your long-term returns. And let me give you an example. I think we've all probably seen this chart. If you were to drop $10,000 into the S&P 500 in 2003, take a nap for 20 years, that money's going to turn into $65,000 over that 20-year time frame. However, if you were the market timer, you said, look, I think I can time when to get in and then when to get out. If during that process you miss the best 10 days, you no longer have 65,000, you only have 30,000. If you miss the best 20 days, 17,000. It goes all the way to the point where you actually start losing money. You miss the best 60 days. That would be like me. I'd be the guy that missed the best 60 days. My 10,000 becomes 4,000. So the bottom line is when you market time, you expose yourself to eroding wealth over time because it's nearly impossible to time the market. I love this chart because it shows that the stock market doesn't go straight up. It has these little jagged lines along the way. And guess what? All of these little jagged lines are anxiety inducing. Every time you see that little jagged line goes down, what do people do who are making investment or emotion-based decisions? They move to cash. And the problem with that is they don't get back in time to recapture the recovery and then the growth that's on top of that. And so the best days, here's the moral of the story. The best days often happen right after the worst days. It's really, really tough to time this. And when you get out and get in at the wrong time, it leads to permanent loss. Now, time in the market is really what grows your wealth over time. There's no shortcuts to the top of the mountain. There, your brother on the golf course who gave you the stock tip, or if you're listening to Jim Cramer on TV, on cable news, these guys might tell you that they know what an individual stock's going to do next, but it's impossible to know what it's really going to do. And so nobody's hunch is going to sort of tell you, and maybe I need to switch cameras here because this is sort of driving me nuts here.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, looking at that chart you just had up there a second ago, one thing about that chart was that was compressing about 55 years worth of stock market history into that little graph. So unfortunately, the jagged edges, they look like little blips, but when we're in the thick of it, they look a whole lot steeper in the moment because we're looking at usually a year to date kind of a thing. And although your book doesn't mention this directly, but because you get into it a little bit later, so I'm not going to take away your thunder. But there are times when 5 years before, 5 years after retirement, you really got to pay attention to that part. But you do address that as a later principle. So I just wanted to mention that. So the chart in a way is unintentionally misleading only because it's compressed. That's the only reason.
And all those little jagged edges are emotion inducing jagged edges. They make us feel emotions that make us make, frankly, stupid decisions when it comes to our retirement savings. And although it's not my opinion, it's actually all the studies have borne that out over and over and over again. Now, I want to get into something about the efficiency of the market. And the theme here is the market is already priced in. Every share of every stock across the planet is a certain price for a reason. Why? Because all of the available information in the world tells us that that's what it should be worth. If it were worth more, then if there was some information on the planet that said that this stock is going to go up, then people would buy it and they would drive it to a higher price. Anybody that claims that they can predict what a stock is going to do ahead of time is claiming to have knowledge that the rest of the world doesn't have, or they're a member of Congress and they're sitting on a committee and they just listened in on a Microsoft hearing and they learned that Microsoft is going to come out, they're going to buy up some other company and therefore they're going to pull a Nancy Pelosi and be able to get in advance of everybody else and make a killing, or they're using insider information, which we know is illegal. So I love this quote. A lot of you guys may have read this before. It's one of my favorite quotes. It was on Reddit. It actually went viral a couple years ago, and it's this whole idea that everything is already priced into the stock market. And this guy says, don't even ask the question. The answer is yes, it's priced in. Think Amazon will beat the next earnings? That's already been priced in. You work at the drive-thru for Mickey D's and found out that the burgers are made of human meat, priced in. You think insiders don't already know that? The market is an all-powerful, all-encompassing being that knows the very inner workings of your subconscious before you were even born. Your very existence was priced in decades ago when the market was valuing Standard Oil's expected future earnings based on population growth that would lead to your birth. What age would you get a car? How many times you would drive your car every week? How many times you take the bus, train, et cetera? Anything you can think of has already been priced in, even the things you aren't thinking of. You have no original thoughts. Your consciousness is just an illusion. I don't agree with all this part. Product of the omniscient market. Free will is a myth. The market sees all, knows all, and will be there from the beginning of time until the end of the universe. The market is already priced in the heat death of the universe. So please, before you make a post on WSB asking whether Apple is priced in AirPods 11 sales or whatever, know that it has already been priced in, and don't ask such a dumb question. So a classic example of this is we say, okay, let's say Apple is worth $274 a share. Why is it worth $274 a share? Because all the available information in the world says that it's worth $274 a share. It reflects the cumulative wisdom of all the most intelligent experts in the world that have analyzed Apple to no end. And all that information is available to the entire planet. If there were new information that were to arise that suggested that Apple should be worth more, then buyers would clamor to get their hands on Apple stock, and that would drive it to a new price. So $274 is the market's best estimate of its fair value right now, and it's impossible to predict what it's going to do next. Now, I love this chart because a lot of people say, I don't want to do stock market investing. That's tantamount to going into a casino and rolling the dice. Well, maybe over the course of one day where it's sort of 50-50, but over the course of 1 month, you have a 38% chance that you won't lose money. Over 1 year, 25% chance you won't lose money. Over 5 years, 11% chance you won't lose money. Over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, you're virtually guaranteed to not lose money. Okay. Contrast that with like a casino where you go up to the casino and there's a sign above the casino that says our stocks are 90 or our slot machines are 97% slot machines. What are they in essence telling you? They're telling you that you have you're going to emerge from the casino after you play those slots with 3% less money than when you went in. They're basically saying we guarantee that you will lose money. Okay. Stock market, especially when you have a long-term investment horizon, it's virtually a risk-free proposition. Now, you may say, hey, look, I don't want to invest in the stock market because I don't like Donald Trump. Or I don't want to invest in the stock market because I don't like Joe Biden. Well, guess what? If you had started back in 1953 with $1,000, and you said, I am only going to invest when Republicans are, in charge because they know how to sort of safeguard the economy. Look at what your money would have been worth. It would have been worth about $1,000. If you only want to be investing when Democrats are in charge, well, Bill Clinton did great in the 90s. Was Bill Clinton really responsible for that? Well, I don't really know about that. Here's the bottom line. If you stay invested, regardless of which political party is in power, you're going to have a lot more money over time. In this case, that $1,000 would have turned into something like 1.6 million. So if I were to summarize principle 2, I'd simply say predicting short-term stock market is a really, really tough proposition. If you don't get in and out at just the right time, it's going to absolutely devastate your returns. Long-term exposure to the entire market is what reduces risk. Avoid shortcuts to the top of the mountain, stay invested through storms, and that will see you through to the end. So principle number 3, don't buy individual stocks. I think that's principle number 2 here is setting this up. Do not buy individual stocks, buy the entire market. Why should you not buy individual stocks? Because speculation does not lead to long-term wealth. You want a stock portfolio that covers the entire globe. Wealth is created through systematic participation in the entire market, not by picking one winner, because we think we know what that one stock is going to do. So this is why individual stocks are so scary, because the market has already priced in what that stock should be worth. And when you invest in an individual stock, you're basically saying, I know better than the market. I feel in my bones that I think this stock is going to go up. And how do you know that? You don't. You're going off of a hunch, and hunches are not a good way to build long-term wealth. Why buying the entire market works? Because you're able to participate in the growth of the global economy. You're going to remove the risk associated with owning a single stock. You're going to avoid all the emotion that goes into owning single stocks, and it's going to ensure that you're always going to be participating in the winners of tomorrow. I love the quilt chart. I've actually got a quilt chart in the story. And the quilt chart, I like to give the classic example. Let's say it's 2016 and Jim Cramer on TV, he's the stock jockey. He says, hey, look, energy was amazing in 2016. It finished at the top of all of these different sectors. It was better than financials, better than utilities, better than real estate, better than consumer discretionary. Energy is the way to go. You should put all your money into energy. Well, what if you heeded that advice? Well, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2030, you would have lost huge amounts of money. You probably would have lost almost all of your money because energy came in last place. So the moral of the story here is it's impossible to predict which of these sectors is going to win in any given year. So what's the antidote to that? The antidote to that is you simply must own all of the sectors all at once. And if you do, you will be guaranteed to always be holding the winners in any given year. The best way, in my way, and this is really not my opinion, I've done a lot of research, Warren Buffett and John Bogle, what they recommend in terms of a long-term portfolio if you want to own the entire market. Number 1, you invest in index funds because they're low expense. And number 2, you want to have 70% of your total investment in the U.S., in a total U.S. stock market index fund. Why? Because the U.S. is the financial engine of the world, and 30% in international. But you might say, hey, Dave, look, we're all patriots here. Why not just put everything into the S&P? Why not put everything into the, the U.S. stock market? index fund? Well, because there are some decades where international outperforms, like 2000 to 2009. The US stock market sort of went sideways for 10 years, and the international massively outperformed. And so an argument to be made for having some money all over the planet. And this way, you're going to be investing in about 12,000 companies worldwide. Now, if you guys remember back to the 90s, like I do, mutual funds were all the rage. Why were mutual funds all the rage? Because a fund manager could basically throw a dart at a dartboard and hit a winning stock. And so these guys were earning 30% per year. And people thought it was because they were really, really good at picking stocks. Well, as time wore on, it became evident that human beings are not good at picking stocks. And so what mutual fund managers have done over time is they basically put more and more index funds inside their own portfolios. Why? Because they found that they can't, through their own guessing on which stock's going to be better and going to grow more over time, they're basically not they're underperforming their index benchmarks. And so I love this video. Some of you might have seen it on TikTok or Twitter or what have you. This is the example of this is a wealth manager putting your money into an index fund and then charging you 1.5% for it. So take a listen. Sorry, let me give you some sound here. Got some sound already, all right. Got stop the subway, right? He's ushering the subway. He's closing the subway, and then he's pushing the subway, right? I love it because I think it really is the perfect example of a mutual fund manager who is taking credit for what a fund actually does.
I'm a modern portfolio theory nerd. I guess that is R squared illustrated right there, right?
If you say so.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so if anybody's familiar with alpha, beta, R squared. R squared is a talent index. It measures how much of a fund comes from the market, and the difference from 100 that comes from the management. What you're saying is the inverse. That's what the management did. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you for pointing that out. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that the most of the return that somebody experiences in a given year is going to come from the indexes doing the heavy lifting, and I think that's reflected by most of these modern fund managers have 70% of their portfolio sitting in indexes, S&P 500, those types of things. So individual stocks are going to really make you gray. They're going to make you worry. You're going to be fretting all the time. What is the stock going to do? I've talked to lots of clients over the years. They said, I felt good about Tesla. I actually had a friend of mine. He goes, I put $400,000 in Tesla. I went down to 200, and then I'm just waiting for it to go back up. I mean, that guy is living a nightmare. I mean, he is stressing all the time. So don't invest in individual stocks. Buy the entire market. You don't have to be a good market timer. You don't need to get the stock tip from your buddy on the golf course. All you got to do is invest in a global index portfolio in time. Now, you may say, hey, look, I want to tilt towards small cap, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I'm talking about an investment philosophy that can be embraced by people who are starting out in life and they just want a strategy that will build wealth over time. So this is what the likes of John Bogle are recommending. Step number 4, or principle number 4, is set it and forget it. So what does this mean? It means you need to build a systematic investment plan where investment companies are taking money out of your account at the beginning of the month, and you're simply spending whatever's left over. So set your plan up, get it in place, stop tinkering with it, ignore your account statements, and long-term wealth requires discipline, not constant tinkering. So you really got to automate your plan. It's got to be out of mind, out of sight. I have money that comes out of my account on a weekly basis. It goes into my stock account. I never look at my statements. I never look at my app, my Schwab app, because I frankly don't care what it's doing. If I were to start looking at it every day, I'd start to feel anxious and I'd start to make dumb investment decisions. All the studies bear that out. If you look at your statements, you actually experience worse returns over time. And start when you're young. This is the cost of procrastinating. I don't think this is going to be news for anybody. If you want $5 million by day one of retirement, and you can grow your money at 10% per year, and you start at 25, you just don't have to save as much. We're talking $700 a month. But if you wait just 10 years, it goes up to 22,000. If you wait 20 years, it goes all the way up to, you're saving $5,000 a month. So the bottom line is there's never a better time to save for retirement than starting right now. If you delay the amount you have to save, you really have to get caught up, and it explodes what you are required to save over time. And I love this idea of the 40-year nap. You set your plan up. You never look at your account statements. Emotion's going to completely crater your investment results. Investing success is all about buying low and selling high. And if you are constantly looking at your investment account statements, you're going to buy high and sell low. So take a 40-year nap. So if I were to sum this entire principle up with something that Dave and I recognize because we're old. There's this guy named, I think his name was Mike Papil. He owned a company called Ronco, and they sold rotisserie chicken ovens. And take a listen to one little snippet of the
easy, folks. So simple. Isn't it, you guys?
information.
Isn't it simple? That nice? I'll put the lid on. This is kind of nice. There it goes. Excellent. Slide this over. Get this chicken over, this chicken over, and this chicken over. And I'll just walk over here. I'll put it in this new Pro model. I'll slide it back. If you followed all the instructional material, you just...
So that's really what we're talking about, people. You set up a plan, you put it in place, you automate it, and then you walk away. You take a nap for 40 years. Now, I'm not saying don't rebalance. I think that you should rebalance automatically anytime your portfolio gets more than 5% out of whack. But really, you can automate that too. So why does ignoring your investment statements work? Because if you buy the entire market and you automate your contributions, the only real threat is your own behavior. This is, again, studies have borne this out over and over and over again. So the best defense against bad behavior when it comes to investing is to not look at your account statements. Long-term discipline is better than short-term tinkering. Now, I love this example from the Olympics, the last Summer Olympics. I think the whole world was, wow, this was sort of a viral moment, one of the most viral moments from the Olympics. There was this Turkish pistol shooter who showed up at one of the events, and he just walked right in. He had his uniform and he had some glasses, but that was basically it. And he walked in, he picked up his gun, and he proceeded to win a silver medal. Okay. The reason this was so interesting is because when you contrast this guy with all of the other guys in the competition, for example, this guy on the left, they had scopes, they had goggles, they had headbands, they had arm shields, they had vests, they had holsters. They had all these different things to help them win, and none of them actually won. And so this is a perfect example for me. Look at the guy on the right. He's like the investor that's been dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500 for the last 12 years, has no idea what's happening in the market because he hasn't checked his portfolio in a decade. Believe it or not, this is the type of person you want to be. This is the investor you want to be. Versus the guy that's got 4 monitors on his desk. He's got 6 brokerage accounts. He's taking advice from 15 different stock forums. He's making 40 to 50 trades a day. And today he happens to be down 60%. So long story short, be the guy on the right, not the guy on the left. Now, we've all heard the story of Sam and Susie, Sam spender, Susie saver. Susie invests $2,000 for 12 years, and then she falls off the wagon, but lets that money ride for the next 30 years. She's got $193,000. Sam is sort of this party guy. He goes to the clubs, drives the fast cars. He doesn't really get around to saving until he's 34, but then he really jumps on it. He saves $2,000 per year for the next 30 years. So even though Susie has invested about a third the amount of money, she ends up with twice as much money. Why? Because she got a head start. Time was her most valuable asset, and she was able to bring it to bear in her investment plan. So in summary, automate your investment plan. It should be out of mind, out of sight. Time is your best asset. The more you procrastinate, the more it's going to cost you. Don't look at your account statements. Take a nap for 40 years, and that will lead you to success. All right, principle number 5 is really my sweet spot here. It's get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. That was sort of the main thesis of my book, The Power of Zero. So we know that the U.S. is on this apocalyptic debt trajectory. We have unfunded obligations for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the best way to sort of shield yourself from all of this is to get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. Let's talk about debt real quick. You can see this chart on the left. Debt is growing by $2 trillion per year over the next 10 years, and then $3 trillion per year after that. On top of that, we got $200 trillion of unfunded obligations for these entitlement programs. The federal government is going to very soon, they need it now, but even more so in the future, going to need huge infusions of cash. And all of the experts are saying that the most likely source is higher taxes. You may not believe me, but there's a guy who's a lot smarter. He's in the CPA Hall of Fame. He's the former Comptroller General of federal government. I'm proud to say he's become a friend over the years. This is the Honorable David M. Walker. He appeared on a radio show back in 2010 after he had resigned from being the Comptroller General because Congress wouldn't listen to him. And he says, look, I can give you, he says, tax rates have to double or we're going to go broke as a country. And nobody believed him. The radio show host didn't believe him. He goes, look, a little frustrated. He says, look, I can give you a 4-letter word to explain why tax rates have to double. And nobody could guess what it was. So they opened up the phone lines and people started to call in. Nobody could figure out the 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double. They heard debt, they heard kids, they heard jobs, they heard wars, they heard fear. He says, no, the four-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double is math. They said, what do you mean? He says, well, math means you either have to double what's coming in, cut in half what's going out, or some combination of the two. It's simple math.
If
Penn
I
Wharton
may, real
recently came
quick,
out with this.
just the other day, I just got an article. The Treasury just declared the U.S. insolvent, and the media missed it. That just came out 2 days ago.
Yeah,
So
didn't hear it.
we're,
Didn't hear it peep
we
out of the
are,
media for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. This is a really interesting study out of Penn Wharton, came out in 2023. They basically says that if we don't right our fiscal ship of state soon, or actually by 2043, no combination of increasing or reducing spending or increasing taxes will arrest the financial collapse of our nation. They said that it could happen. That's when debt to GDP is 200%, 2043. It could happen as soon as 2040, when the debt GDP is only 175%. So you protect yourself from the impact of higher taxes. You do so by taking advantage of every nook and cranny in the IRS tax code. I'm talking a balanced, comprehensive approach that includes 6 different streams of tax-free income. What am I talking about? Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, Roth conversions, taking money out of your tax-deferred accounts up to your standard deduction and have that be offset so that you aren't paying any tax. Properly structured cash value life insurance. We've got folks on this call that I'm sure likes whole life and IUL. I'll get into which one I prefer for this particular strategy. And then if you can keep your provisional income low enough, your Social Security but tax-free. You want to get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. Why? Because if tax rates double, like a lot of experts are now predicting, 2 times 0 is still 0. So if I were to summarize this principle, I simply say, look, taxes are going up. It's not a question of if, but when. It's a mathematical reality. The debt trajectory guarantees it. Get to the 0% tax bracket by taking advantage of every nook and cranny in the IRS tax code. Get to the 0% tax bracket. Why? Because if tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. Principle number 6 has to do with cash value life insurance. Okay. So we got a problem that most retirees face. Dave talked about this as sort of the red zone, the first 5 years prior to retirement and then in retirement. The reality is that if you experience a downturn in the stock market in the first 10 years of retirement and you're taking money out of your stock portfolio in the year following that downturn, what you risk is going into a death spiral from which your portfolio never recovers. And so the question becomes, how do you protect yourself from that risk? And the answer historically has been the 4% rule. What does the 4% rule say? Well, we know that there's a guy named Bill Bengen, who's an MIT trained financial advisor. Didn't know they trained advisors at MIT, but this guy's MIT trained. And back in 1992, he was really concerned with these exorbitant withdrawal rates that people had from their retirement portfolios. People were taking 8%, 9%, 10%. They basically would go like this. They'd ask themselves, what has the stock market done historically? And if the answer to that question was 8%, that's what they would take out of their portfolio. They just didn't understand sequence of returns risk. So he started to do all these simulations. And what he concluded was that 8% withdrawal rates had catastrophic results. It sort of shocked him to his core. Even 5% distribution rates had a 50% failure rate. So what he concluded was that if you took 4% withdrawals, you had a high likelihood that your money would last as long as you do. So the example here is you have $1 million in your IRA. You can take $40,000 out that first year of retirement and then adjust it every year thereafter for inflation. It's conservative because it assumes that you're going to be taking money out following a down year in the market. So the key implication here is that if you didn't have downturns in the market, you could actually take a much higher withdrawal rate out of your portfolio. And so the bottom line is the 4% is a very expensive way to go about eliminating longevity risk from your portfolio. So how much would you need? Here's an example. If you need $100,000 per year above and beyond what Social Security provides in retirement, how do you figure out how much you need to have saved by day one of retirement? Divide 4 into 100,000. That tells you that, wow, 2.5 million that you have to save. And guess what? If you're not on track to save that amount, I've got some pretty unappetizing conversations that we're going to have. You're going to have to either save more, spend less, work longer, die sooner, or take more risk in the stock market. How many of our clients and prospects are really willing to have those types of conversations? Well, I think there's a better way, and that's to set up what we call a volatility shield. And that's what you do is you create 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses in a separate account. And what you do is you live out of that account in the year following a down year in the stock market. And what that does is it gives your stock portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. So let me give you an example of how that might work. By the way, Susie Orman believes in this idea of a volatility shield. Her big idea is to get 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses sitting in a savings account. Take money out of the market where it could have been earning 8 to 10%, put it in a savings account where it's earning less than 0.5%. And she says that you should do that with 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses. This is an absolute catastrophe. If you can set up a legitimate volatility shield account. In other words, you're paying for your living expenses in the year following a down year in the stock market, giving your portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. You can increase your sustainable withdrawal rate from 4 to 8% with a 95% success rate. So let me give you an idea of what that looks like. Will your savings last under an 8% withdrawal rate? Well, if you have 5 years, if you look down at the x-axis, 5 years worth of living expenses accumulated, you have a 93% chance that an 8% withdrawal rate will be sustainable over a 30-year retirement. 4 years, 90, 3 years, 86. Okay, so if Susie Orman's idea for a savings account isn't ideal when it comes to a volatility shield, what are we really looking for? Well, what we want is we want something that's safe. If it's exposed to volatility, it's not going to shield you from volatility. So in that regard, Susie Orman's savings account actually works. But we also want it to be tax-free, free from federal tax, state tax, and capital gains tax. Remember, the goal is to try to accumulate 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses by day one of retirement. If you have to pay taxes during that accumulation period, it's just going to take a lot more money that you have to take out of your stock market portfolio, put in this tax-free account, in this taxable account to be able to have the right amount of money by day one of retirement. It's got to be productive. This is where Susie Orman sort of cartwheels off the tracks. You got to grow it between 5 to 7%. If you can grow it at only 0% or 1%, it's just going to take huge amounts of money to save and accumulate over time to hit that 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses. And it's got to be in place by day one of retirement. What do I think is the best financial tool that qualifies? There's probably people on this call that would object to this. I think it's Index Universal Life. You could make the case that Whole Life does it also very well. The reason why I prefer Index Universal Life is because I believe I can get that 5 to 7% net of fees over time. If I can only get 3 to 4% net of fees over time, I'm going to have to divert even more money away from my stock market investing to put it in, for example, the Whole Life policy. And there's going to be an opportunity cost associated with that. It's got to be guaranteed against stock market loss. Whole Life and Index Universal Life both do that. And it's got to be, distributions have to be tax-free and cost-free. And IUL also gives you that. So here's a case study. John and Mary, both age 30. They want to retire at 65, and they're currently contributing $14,000 per year to their Roth IRAs. They can grow it at 10% per year. At least they think they can. By the time they retire, they got almost 3.8 million. If we have to stick to the 4% rule, that means they're taking out 151,000 that first year and then adjusted for inflation every year thereafter. Let's revise this based on what Ernst & Young said in their recent study, where they made the case that Index Universal Life could increase dramatically the amount of income someone could take out in retirement. Instead of allocating 100% to the Roth IRAs, let's divert 30%. This is actually the Ernst & Young recommendation, not mine. 30%, which is $4,200, to a fully funded, properly structured IUL. Let's keep investing that remaining $9,800 in Roth IRAs. Let's grow the Roth at 10%. Let's grow the IUL at 6%. That's going to give us $468,000 of cash value. And we're going to pay for their living expenses in the year following a down year in the market out of their IUL. Watch what happens when we do that. Remember the pure Roth IRA approach, 4% withdrawal rate, that gave them $151,000 per year. When we combine stock market investing with Index Universal Life, and we can get that 8% withdrawal rate because we're now allowing the stock market to recover before we take further distributions, that's where the magic happens. You combine the life insurance, doing life insurance alone is not going to do it for you. Doing the stock market alone is not going to do it for you. When you put them together, that's where the magic happens. So 8% on a smaller Roth IRA balance is still going to give you $212,000, which is a 40% improvement on the investment-only approach. So in summary, volatility shield protects you from sequence of return risk, allows your portfolio to recover before you make further distributions. It can increase the sustainable withdrawal rate on your stock portfolio from 4 to 8%. It maximizes potential. And I think the best tool to serve as a volatility shield is Index Universal Life.
So
and principle
the way
number
I would
7
put that,
is,
just real quick, I know we're running short on time, but less money in the right place brings out superior income, superior outcomes. That's the best way I know to put that. Regardless whether you're choosing Whole Life or IUL, the people on this call, you know that you're going to be doing it the right ethical way to structure it, no matter which one is your preference. I don't see this overriding an advisor's judgment, which is what you're going into next. For example, going back regarding your principle regarding low cost index funds. Um, if you're a securities license, look, one of my favorite fund companies was American Funds. I am no longer securities licensed, so I can talk about anybody I want and any way I want. So American Funds is generally, they're all index funds. They just happen to be brokers sold. And so that's a low cost way, while you still get to get your GDC in there, but to carry out this kind of advice for your clients. That's the way I see it. That's my thoughts. Please continue on. Wanted to introduce
Okay.
that.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Principle number 7, I think, is really the crowning principle of the entire book, of the entire presentation. Work with a good financial advisor. So people say, hey, Dave, you talked about index funds. That means that you want people to do it yourself. No, quite the opposite. People that do it yourself, they do terribly over time. Even the smartest investors fall victim to their emotions, greed, panic, euphoria. Without someone holding your feet to the fire and holding your hand through the tough times, you are going to lose money. A good financial advisor more than compensates for whatever fees or commissions they make along the way. So, what should a good financial advisor do? I think most do-it-yourselfers know what they should do, but they rarely follow through on it because the volatility makes people emotional, and they therefore make stupid decisions with their investments. A good financial advisor reinforces your long-term investments, prevents you from making stupid, emotion-induced decisions, helps you maintain this discipline when the market gets jittery. Now, the average return lost by do-it-yourself investors because they yield to their emotions is, according to all the studies, it's about 3% per year. What is a typical fee that a good financial advisor might charge you? 1%. Maybe that's the impact of a commission on some of these products over time. What does that mean? That means that our clients are still going to be 2% better off than the do-it-yourselfers if they're working with us. Recent study, I got this from Michael Kitce, says that the clients working with an advisor, a good advisor, would see 2.39 to 2.78% annual return premium over those who do not work with an advisor. It helps you structuring the life insurance, executing the volatility shield plan, taking advantage of every nook and cranny in the IRS tax code. This is, I believe, a Dalbar study over this time period. It was even worse. What they found is that the average investor only did 2.3%, whereas the people who just stuck their money in the S&P 500 and took a nap for that time period actually did 5% better than people who were yielding to their emotions and buying high and selling low instead of buying low and selling high. So principle number 7 is the crown jewel because it completes everything. Our clients aren't going to be able to take advantage of the greatest wealth engine the world has ever known on their own. They just intuitively don't understand that that's the thing to do. They're going to be more timers than having time in the market. They're not going to buy the entire market. They're going to be tempted to buy stocks because they're listening to Jim Cramer on TV. They're not going to understand that it's important to set it and forget it. They're not going to be able to coordinate all of these different streams of tax-free income, and they're not going to understand how the volatility shield fits into the equation. And so really a good financial advisor helps to reinforce principles 1 through 6. So in short, people that don't have a good advisor are probably going to get succumb to their emotions. People that do have a good advisor are probably going to become millionaires. And good financial advisors more than pay for themselves by helping clients stay the course, execute the plan, fund the cash value life insurance in exactly the right way. Now, I do get a question that often arises from financial advisors say, hey, Dave, this is a pretty important message. I think we can agree that would be a pretty important message for the younger generation. They'll say, how am I supposed to bottle up this message and unleash it on my clients and prospects? And I say, well, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I could sort of send you the transcript for this presentation. You can memorize it and then give it to your clients. But I said, I think there may be a better way. I've written this book called The Secret Order of Millionaires. It's custom made for these younger generations, and it sets the table for a conversation about all of these concepts. So this is what I recommend that you do. You buy copies of my book and you send them off to your clients and prospects, and you say, hey, look, Mr. Jones, the other day I was reading this book. As I was reading this book, I couldn't stop thinking about your situation. Do me a favor, read the book. I'll call you back in a week. Let me know what you think. I had a guy that did that with one of my books. He never did more than $40,000 of premium. He did $363,000 of premium. All he did was send the copy out, little handwritten note. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the other day I was reading this book. As I was reading this book, I couldn't stop thinking about your situation. Read the book. Let me call back in a week. Let me know what you think. Very, very easy to do. So that's what I would recommend here. If you know people that are between 20 and say 45, and they just need to get on track and you want to set the table for a conversation about investing, this is the way to do it. I am not bashful about the idea that I'm trying to turn this book into a New York Times bestseller. Last year, I actually sold enough books to become a New York Times bestseller, but apparently the New York Times bestseller list liked Snoop Dogg's cookbook and Dolly Parton's cookbook better than my book. And so I was knocked out of the top 10 because of those two books, each of which sold about half as many as mine. So I am a little bit of a man on a mission this year. I would love your help in trying to get this book onto a New York Times bestseller list. Why? Because I think that if we can take these principles mainstream, I think it's really going to help us. It's going to help our industry, and I think it's going to help all of America. So buy these in bulk. You'll never get them cheaper than you will here today. I'm actually supplementing this with my own money. They're normally $25. I'm supplementing out of my own wallet for $5. Buy as many copies as you want. And got people that buy 50, I have people that buy 100. You can buy as many as you want, but you have to, as you scan this QR code, and it'll take you to a landing page, you have to use the word secret, all capital letters, secret at checkout, like Secret Order of Millionaires. And if you, I would be honored if you help me in this goal to make this book a bestseller. And yeah, buy as many copies as you like and use them to set the table for a conversation about tax-free retirement planning. So I'm going to leave this up here, Dave, for people who still want to maybe take a picture of the QR code or what have you, and I'll just pass it back to you, Dave, with many thanks for having me on. And if you want to close with any comments of your own, or if we want to do some Q&A, happy to do that as well.
Well, we could do a little bit of Q&A, that's for sure. But one other thing I wanted to point out, again, not giving away the book, but you did have a person illustrate lost opportunity cost, even though you don't use that term in the book. Someone who put all, okay, we talk about gambling a little bit. Look, I am not a gambler. I did it once and it didn't take. But if you wanted to play roulette, this guy put it all on black 25 or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm making up a number here. And he did it a few times and only had to show for it was really a pittance compared to what he could have had if he had followed the principles. So I really liked that contrast story that was also illustrated in there as well. Let's open it up for questions and such.
And people can put their questions into the chat if they want to.
In the chat,
or they can unmute themselves. Either way.
So I see Don McHugh. Thank you, Don. Glad you're on and listening. But I did share that article both on Facebook and there in the chat that the Treasury just declared the U.S. insolvent. So. And now, if anybody's raising their hand, with my view, I cannot see anything. So I have to click on meeting. Here we go. Okay. So, and Kathy, I'm glad to see that you're on and listening. We met a couple of years ago at a NAFA event. Doesn't have to be just me. That or I already read everybody's mind and answered all their questions in advance because that was what I thought of. So.
I have a question. So you made a good point about making this more mainstream. Aside from the fact that people obviously want to keep secrets because they can benefit from them, what are some of the reasons that you understand to be why it is not more public? I'm a recent convert and have been very grateful for these strategies, but I'm very disappointed that it was not more mainstream, but things that were not as beneficial to me were readily available to me.
So your question is why these principles seem to make a lot of sense. It seems like a common sense approach. Why are more people not embracing it? Why did they not teach us this stuff in high school? Why is this stuff not on billboards? I mean, that's a really good question. It's out there in sort of disparate pieces. You just sort of have to search for it. I think, not everybody believes that tax rates in the future are going to be higher than they are today. Not everybody believes that life insurance can increase your income in retirement. Not everybody believes that investing in the entire market is really the way to go. And so really what I felt like my job, what is incumbent on me to do is to take these time-tested principles that can be found in lots of different places. John Bogle talks about this stuff, but he never talks about life insurance or tax rates going up. So I had to sort of aggregate all of these ideas into one place, into one story, into one book, because I haven't invented any of this stuff. All I did was sort of aggregate all of these ideas into one place. write a story around them that I think is going to appeal to the younger generation. So it's out there. There are billboards for some isolated threads of what we've talked about today, but nobody has really put it all together in one, for example, single book. They can be found, and some people are shouting various elements of this from the rooftops, but they're just not shouting all of it from the rooftops. And that's really been the goal in writing this book.
Yeah, and we can look at the agendas of some of these other shows. Who are the sponsors behind them? Because sponsors dictate agendas behind different shows and things. So that's what I always look for is follow the money a little bit. But usually, a lot of the things that you're talking about is the stuff that we've been learning about in financial advice ever since I've been in it. So we just got to bring the good principles to light. And you're one of the most prolific authors to do that. Another one is Tom Hegna. He's got his books out there. And of course, his latest one was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is kind of in line. His takes a little bit more of a budget approach than your book. Your book is once you've got the money, what are you doing with it? What is your long-term plan of what you freed up? So there's a little bit of not a contrast, but just a little bit of difference there.
I've read Tom's book. The thing that our books have most in common is the word millionaire.
Yes.
I think you're right. I don't think people should necessarily conflate our two books. I have read his book and I agree with everything in there. He's talking about the importance of finding your, what did he call it? The Kaizen or Kajud, whatever that Japanese word is. Ikigai, the intersection of what you're good at, what you love doing, and what helps other people. He talks about the importance of a good work ethic, the importance of buying used cars versus new cars, and how that can compound over time. So, like if you take what he is recommending, what I recommend, and you give that as a joint, 2-volume set to any graduating senior, they're going to be set for life, I think. So, yeah, he's got a great book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions, comments, concerns, kudos? We are at the top of the hour here, and we know that we're always pressed for
Just a quick
information.
comment I want to share.
Please.
One is that I was sharing some of these things as an agent with my brother-in-law. My nephew started answering a lot of the questions, and I said, "How did you learn that?" And he said, "He's in a private school in San Francisco, and he goes to school with billionaires kids." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. You're learning that in your school with other billionaire kids, and we're learning things that our kids are learning things that'll never be utilized in the future." As we think about this, I was in conversations with an elected official from Los Angeles who oversees this, is in the superintendent roles for LA schools. And she says, "I'd love for this information to be more readily available because as she's now a client and understanding how these things benefit her, she's realizing so many constituents are not aware." How do we get in front of those circles that are in positions to influence those communities to provide that information?
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation for a different day. I have plenty to say on that. That's I think a different conversation for a different day. But
Sounds
yeah,
good.
I mean the trick of our business is you might have the message, but if you don't have an audience to give that message to, you're still unemployed, right? So you've got to find a way to put yourself in front of a predictable, sustainable, repeatable stream of new clients. So you can send me an email at david@powerzero.com. I can give you a couple ideas.
I'll just piggyback on that is that I am here in California as well, so you are close enough by me. I am in Riverside. So being here, I do know that we do have financial literacy that's going to become part of the high school curriculum, at least the high school. I think it might be through all grades. I'm not completely sure. My only thing is literacy in how. There's so many ways to talk about financial literacy, and I don't know how or who's going to be behind it. And so I'll be curious to see. Hopefully, it's very simple, great concepts. I went through an adult living class when I was a senior, I think a senior in high school, whatever it was, and we learned how to fill out a check. You write the written amount, you write the numeric amount and stuff. Here's how you endorse it. We learned stuff like that. We learned a little bit about taxes. There's all the stuff that you have to do as an adult. So anyway, I don't know how financial literacy is going to be coming about, but apparently it will be. My kids are graduating, so technically I don't have to worry about it, but I do wonder about it for our kids. So anyway, with that, and how you can reach me as well. If you found me on Facebook, you can message me there. Usually, I'm usually pretty accessible, and but I'm at davidkinderfinancial.com. Pretty easy to to remember that. Anyway, let's wrap this up. We're right over time. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. It was a
Thank
great
you for
book.
having me.
Again, my synopsis is that it's The Millionaire Next Door meets The Richest Man in Babylon, along with Stephen R. Covey's Begin with the End in Mind. It maps it all out. It's a great tool. It does not replace the advice of an advisor. It supplements it. It brings them back to you to help them implement a plan that's right for them, depending on where they're at. So that's my synopsis and bottom line. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you back in Facebook. And David, thank you, and we'll go from
Yeah,
here.
thank you,
All right.
David. Thanks, everyone.